Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's finally here. We are here for the last episode of Why I Want 2022. We said last week, talking about Elias Salomonsson, that this would be the last episode of the year, and we are indeed going over one of the guys that I feel like is so appropriately placed in this spot, because if we talked about this guy a few weeks ago, we probably wouldn't be saying the same things that we're going to be saying in this video here. This is because this prospect has been one of the biggest risers throughout the past few weeks, and is a guy that could go somewhere in the top 5, maybe even 3rd overall if everything goes right. So, let's talk today about a USNTDP forward who is not named Logan Cooley. He is not named Jimmy Snuggerud. He is not named Lane Hudson or Isaac Howard or Frank Nazar. Today we're talking about probably the guy with the best first name in the draft, Cutter Gauthier. What an absolutely lethal name, by the way. Cutter Gauthier. Ooh, you don't want to mess with a guy named Cutter. This is a player that has been really rising up the ranks the past few weeks. Here's why. He's 18 years old, 6'3", 201 as a center left wing player. He played primarily on the left wing this NTDP season, but as we continue this conversation, we're going to go over the plan for him heading into the long-term future. He was born in Sweden, but an interesting thing about Gauthier is that he actually grew up in Arizona, so there were a lot of similarities between Gauthier and Austin Matthews when it came to growing up, playing youth hockey, and just breaking into the NTDP as children, because both these guys had that upbringing in sunny state Arizona, and as we've seen from his specs, he's a pretty big player as well. Playing for the USNTDP this season, he had himself 54 games played, 65 points, 34 goals as well. He actually produced pretty well against both the USHL and NCAA competition that he faced off against, and he was one of the top goal scorers on the entire team, alongside of Rutger McGroarty, whom we have also chronicled in the Why I Want series for this year. Even though Cutter Gauthier may have had fewer points on the season than guys like McGroarty, Nazar, Cooley, and Howard, there still is a profile for a player here that bodes pretty well for a lot of scouts that are trying to project where he's going to go in the long-term future. This is very evident by the draft rankings. As you can see, he has a consolidated ranking of 8th overall. He's ranked 11th by Elite Prospects, 6th by Future Considerations, 13th by McKean, 7th by Craig Button. He is the 3rd-ranked player for North American skaters by NHL Central Scouting. Sportsnet has him at 7, Recruit at 7 as well. However, you have some outlets that are also a lot lower than him. The Puck Authority has him at number 28, Smart Scouting has him at 18, etc., etc. Now, if you go back to May of this year and you take a look at some of the previous draft rankings that had been established, Cutter Gauthier back in May was ranked 13th by Bob McKenzie. Craig Button had him at number 6. In fact, Button was the highest rank out of all of the major scouting outlets back in this time frame. Almost 2 months later, though, and a lot more outlets have him in a top 10 spot. Why is that, and what are scouts seeing in this guy? Well, next season he's going over to play for the Boston College Eagles in the NCAA, and it's been documented pretty heavily that Cutter Gauthier's role with BC is actually going to be as a primary center. NHL teams also started asking this guy at the draft combine more and more about that center projection, and the common consensus is that he's probably going to start developing in that center role. This is a player that has a pretty good finishing ability. He's very skilled, not to mention big and powerful. Plus, scouts have noted his two-way off-puck abilities as well. This is a player that, if you're playing him as a left wing, which he had been the majority of the season this year, you're probably going to get yourselves a, let's say, Tyler Toffoli-esque kind of player if he pans out. But if you start developing him at center, you try to use that power of his to command more of the middle of the ice, you use his goal-scoring ability to try to facilitate more offense in a straight-line direction, there's a lot more projectability that scouts are in love with compared to his projection as a winger by itself. Let's go over onto Dobber Prospects and take a look at their little reports over here for Gauthier. He's a well-rounded forward with an array of dangerous shots in his arsenal. He plays a strong game off the puck, and he should grow into a two-way goal-scoring winger at the NHL level. Now, it says winger because this little write-up was written before the draft combine. This is what it said back in May of this same year. After netting 20 goals in 44 games with the U17 squad a year ago, Gauthier exploded for 34 goals in 54 games with the NTDP's U18 team this year, second most on the team. He would go on to add another 3 goals and 6 assists through 6 games at the U18s, earning a silver medal with Team USA. Perhaps more impressive than the goal totals themselves is the variety of ways in which Gauthier was able to find the back of the net throughout the season. He is opportunistic around the net, positioning himself well for rebound chances or backdoor passes. He can beat defenders with strong power moves to the net, and he's a dangerous one-touch scorer who can pounce on loose pucks in the slot or hammer one-timers from the face-off circle. Gauthier was always considered a fairly safe pick due to his projectable frame and well-rounded game, but he took his offense to another level this year, and he could end up being selected in the top 10 of the draft as a result. If you go over to what they said the next month, Gauthier spent some time playing down the middle but was mostly used as a winger with the NTDP this year. NHL teams, however, reportedly view him as a center at the pro level, and Gauthier stated himself that BC plans to play him as a center when he begins his collegiate career next fall. His draft stock was already rising in the latter part of the season, and the fact that the NHL teams believe he can play center will only increase it further. And as a result, you take a look at what some of the social media profiles are saying about Cutter Gauthier and his profile here. I've seen comparisons online made to Bobby Ryan, who is also a player that's a little bigger, a little bit more skilled, not necessarily the best shooter out there with the best skills or the best speed or whatever, but just a good all-around guy. And you even have people like Chris Peters on dailyfaceoff.com writing in his mock draft from a few days ago that Cutter Gauthier is going to go as high as number 3. Now, it makes a little bit more sense when you see that the third overall team is Arizona, so they'd be taking their hometown boy, but let's go over on the Daily Faceoff and read what Peters has to say about this NHL mock draft. Third overall, Cutter Gauthier, center winger. Alright, I'm going to take a little bit of a swing here on the mock. I've heard rumblings that the Coyotes could shake up the consensus a little bit. They have 7 picks within the top 45 of this draft. Wow, I didn't realize it was that many. That's crazy. It's not super far off the board to go with Gauthier here, though it would not be my preference. The added benefit of adding Gauthier, a big, athletic goal scorer who can play on the wing or down the middle, is that he is a local. The Coyotes have said they really want to add players that want to be Coyotes. Gauthier would probably relish playing near his hometown of Scottsdale, Arizona. I could also see the Coyotes looking at a defenseman or just sticking with a guy a lot of people have no worse than third in Logan Cooley. And so, with Cutter Gauthier being this polarizing of a guy, it ultimately boils down to the ones that are making the choice, the NHL teams themselves. Bob McKenzie's list is pulled by NHL scouts that he interviews, and the consensus ranking, or not the consensus, but the majority ranking, have him at 5th overall. This is a guy that probably won't slip down as far back as 28th overall like the Puck Authority insinuates that he should, or maybe even 18th overall like Smart Scouting has him at. This guy will probably be somewhere in the top 10, maybe even the top 15 at the very latest, mostly because of that center transition. A lot of people value centers over wingers because they command more ice, because there's more responsibility, and if you're able to play center, it kind of means you have a better sense of where the game is going directionally speaking because you have less responsibility. Wingers are more attuned to the perimeter and board battles, etc., but being able to control the middle of the ice is something that a lot of scouts value, and for Cutter Gauthier, I mean, you have a big, talented goal scorer already that might be making that shift towards allowing himself to play a more defensively responsible role. I could totally see why scouts are going out there and saying this guy should be a top 10 pick. Now, for me personally, would I see Gauthier in my personal top 10? I really don't know, but at the end of the day, if he does get taken there, I could understand it. I could understand the potential and why a team would want to have this guy as highly up there in that spot as they would. But the question to me is, would you take him over a guy like Matty Savoie? Would you take him over a Karamaki, whose goal-scoring ability is so good? Would you take him over a Logan Cooley, even, who is the best player on the NTDP? These are questions that are going to be answered by this time in a few days, because the draft is coming up, right? So we'll see ourselves to the door for Why I Want 2022 and just review everything before we head over into the actual event itself. That has been the series here for this entire 2022 draft class. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about the final player over here, Cutter Gauthier. If you're a Coyotes fan, would you want your team to take this guy at 3rd overall? If you're a fan of any other team in the top 10, would you be interested in Cutter Gauthier slipping or falling all the way to your palms? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video and this series for this year. So that's Trolls 99, and bye.